Later on today's episode,
There are a lot of times in the world that we live in that I just feel so weak and like, what can I do? What difference can I make? I am only one, but I just have to seek and find the things that I can do, that I'm responsible for.
This is On the Other Hand, a podcast sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas, where hope and common ground meet.
each episode features community leaders from Arkansas and beyond, sharing stories and insights on how together we can strengthen both our relationships and our communities.
In the first part of our conversation with Gay White, who is Arkansas's 36th First Lady and co-chair with former First Lady Barbara Pryor of Friends of Arkansas PBS, we heard Gay's story of becoming part of Arkansas politics, her friendships across the political aisle, especially with fellow First Lady Barbara Pryor, and her views of the changing political climate in our state. Now, let's get to this second part of our conversation with Gay White. Gay, Arkansas, as you know, has gone through a pretty big political transition during your lifetime, actually in fairly recent years. It was a largely Democratic state, albeit probably somewhat conservative, and now it's pretty much a Republican state at the moment. And you were in the middle of that shift. You've seen it. You've made observations about that. What about that era feels differently to you then versus now, especially in terms of how people relate to each other over politics?
Well, it breaks my heart to see how it has evolved. It really does. It just causes me great concern. And human beings are human beings. We're all flawed, and we were back then, we are now, and we always will be. But I just know when Frank, my husband, was involved in the political world, there was a certain graciousness there. There was a maturity. They were grown-ups and they respected each other regardless of where they were coming from. And I honestly don't remember labeling going on, people putting people in pigeonholes. That just, when I hear that today, it makes my skin crawl. I don't know why we have to exaggerate a person's position or passion. And I just do not recall that at all back then. So I'm really sad to see what we've come to, in all honesty.
So, what do you think's changed about the culture of politics? What's accounted for things going downhill that way?
I don't know, Glenn, that's an interesting question. I think it's somewhere along the way our leaders have changed as far as their messaging, the way they view each other. And I do think it all emanates from the human heart. As I said, we are all flawed. But I think I gave an example a little while ago about how Frank was such an example to me. And I really did follow his leadership in our lives. And it was just so good. It was so good for me. And so I think we do tend to follow the leaders in our country, in our sports world, in whatever genre it may be.
You mentioned about the heart several times. I think that's an important point. Now, most of the time when you're talking about from the heart, you're thinking about in terms of people's relationships with each other, appreciating where the other person's coming from, seeing
Yeah.
what kind of character they have.
Yeah.
I'm a retired psychologist, so I bring this up from time to time, but I know that the emotions are really, really strong and powerful, both
Yes.
the good and the bad. And it does, what you said reminds me of that I suspect there's been a greater appreciation in recent years that, oh, we can have an advantage politically by arousing the negative emotions as opposed to the positive emotions.
True. That's an interesting observation. I think you're right. I know with newspapers or television, good news doesn't sell as well as bad news. It's just a sad fact. And so I think you're right. I think you captured it exactly, that focusing on the negative certainly rouses people up, but not in a good, healthy way. Not at all. fear tactics just are not healthy.
Yeah, fear and anger both, which is,
True.
by the way, I think what happens with social media, the same kind of thing can be observed in social media. That's how they get engagement and greater
Exactly.
money from people
Right.
liking something and paying attention to it because
Mm,
it arouses those negative emotions. So that's
I
a tough
agree.
lift for people.
Yeah.
Kind of going in the other direction then, our podcast is sponsored by Braver Angels Arkansas.
Mhm.
And among the things we do is we try to help people engage constructively across political differences, teach them skills for doing that. So when you hear about efforts like what we're making and what you saw Frank do and other people in your life,
Mhm.
how does that resonate with your own experience of how relationships can work across differences?
Well, I think that's the key. And ultimately, the responsibility lies with me. The buck stops here with Gay White. And years ago, I read a quote by an old, long ago preacher and politician. Is Edward Everett Hale was his name, and he said, "I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do." And so I read that, and because there are a lot of times in the world that we live in that I just feel so weak and like, what can I do? What difference can I make? And yet I am only one, but I, I just have to seek and find the things that I can do, that I'm responsible for. And going back to serving on the board of the Nature Conservancy, that's one thing I can do in caring for this world. I can't go out and save the world from a warming climate or these things that are happening. And yet I can serve in my little acre of the world. And if there are enough of us who do that, then we can make real positive contributions.
One of the things that helps us in having relationships across various sources of division
Mm,
is not giving in to stereotypes and things like that.
mm,
People develop these misunderstandings, stereotypes about people on the other side because they have some form of disagreement. It may be politics, it may be religion, or something else. I'm wondering, you seem to be pretty good at interacting and accepting people of different types. Could you describe maybe one thing that people might misunderstand about someone who belongs to the other political party? Doesn't matter if it's Democrat, Republican. What do you think would be a big area of misunderstanding that might help people bridge that gap a bit?
Well, I can only tell you what I've experienced in my life. And it's always so interesting to me. But because my husband served as governor in a particular party, I meet people often who assume that they absolutely know me, they know my beliefs. I'm stereotyped as a Republican. And so I just they come at me from that direction. And that's happened ever since Frank was in politics. But I just say, you don't really know me. You don't know me. And so again, it's relating personally to people, not as I love what you said as a stereotype. We have to know each other. And I keep going back to the person of the heart, but I just think that is so important to cross political or cultural or any kind of divides in life, and not blaming people. That's something that we are only responsible for ourselves, our how we handle relationships, where we come from. And I ask God to work on my heart all the time. I need refining and shaping to love people with the love that he's loved me with. And so I'm probably the one that needs the most work. Not you, but me. And so I think we just have to search our hearts and see what's motivating us.
I don't know if you're the one who needs the most work, but I
I
think
know.
the point is important that we all would benefit from work in that respect. So I appreciate that comment.
Yeah.
But it's a sense of humility. I do think about, I often talk about in my classes, is the need for intellectual humility,
Hmm.
to realize that we don't know everything and that we have not experienced everything. And so we need to hear from other people who have different perspectives. And actually, it's what makes like group projects and community work be valuable, because people who have different viewpoints and different backgrounds that they're bringing to something will have very different ways of addressing something. And if I just think I don't need them because they are of a particular political party, or have
Mm.
voted, have a sign in their yard because they're my neighbor for
Right.
somebody different, then I have lost out on the beauty of having that relationship. And that's what I'm hearing you say throughout
Mhm.
this first part of our podcast. So.
I agree.
Okay. Well, Gay, let's turn now to one of the key things that we wanted to talk to you about, and that is the issue of preserving public broadcast system programming in Arkansas. That's what got you back into the public spotlight recently, you and Barbara Pryor both. So let's talk about how that effort came together and why the two of you felt, or let's speak for yourself, why you felt compelled to step in that role. So just start off a little bit about Friends of Arkansas PBS and
Mhm.
how it came together, the goals, and how you and Barbara came to be co-chair.
Okay. I'm like every other citizen in the state. I read in December that Arkansas was no longer going to be affiliated with PBS, Public Service Broadcasting. And our, I just, I thought, why? When I read that in the newspaper, I really did. I was shocked. And I think many of us were. And so I began to be very concerned about it. And just personally, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, just in expressing my concern about disaffiliating. And this is an interesting aside. One of my neighbors and a very dear friend is Skip Rutherford, who has been the dean of the Clinton School for Public Policy. And he and Bill Clinton have been very close friends through the years. Well, it just so happens that Skip and I have become friends. And he walks by my house all the time. And so it's funny. I've invited him to come sit on the front porch before, and we just sit out there and just cuss and discuss about things in the world. And we've agreed that we do agree on so much more than we don't. But I guess it was maybe a couple of months ago, Skip called me one day and he said, Gay, this initiative is being put together, and it's been suggested that you and Barbara Pryor be co-chairs of the effort to look for positive ways to keep PBS in Arkansas. And he said, would you be interested? And I said, absolutely, yes. That's how I became involved. I was not out looking for something to, I wasn't looking for a cause, but I already had it inside. That's how it came about for me. And it was just sort of a natural fit since I had already expressed my thoughts on it. So that's how I got involved. And it's been real interesting as I have become more involved, and maybe it's been a little bit more public. I cannot begin to tell you the number of people in the state, in my part of the world at least, that I can't go to the grocery store, I can't go to the doctor, I can't go anywhere without people stopping me and saying, oh, thank you, please save PBS. I get emails, I get texts. And so it's not just me and it's not just Barbara. There is a huge groundswell of Arkansas citizens. And when people talk to me, I don't say, well, what party are you in? Do you know? That's not it. This is something that ties us all together. Our appreciation for the educational and the value of entertainment and cultural, historical information that we receive on PBS.
It's good to know. I wonder, it sounds like then that pairing of you and Barbara was intentional by the people who were putting this together. What do you think the intent was, and what do you think the impact will be of the two of y'all being the co-chairs?
True. I think the intent in putting Barbara and me together, people assume that we're enemies because we're of different political parties. They just assume we're adversaries. And I think they just thought that'll show people. I don't know. That's kind of my feeling. But when I was asked and consented to do this, I did say, and I told them, I said, I will only be a part of an initiative that is positive, that is not divisive, that looks for solutions, that doesn't concentrate on differences. And I'll work in that environment. And if it goes off the rails any other direction, then I don't want to be a part of it. And so thus far, it's been a real positive. People love to make something of it, but that's not my intent. And I know that's not Barbara's intent.
Well, it's good that it's bipartisan. It sounds like it's
Sure,
very clear that there are a lot of people with various political views that value PBS.
absolutely.
So let's get into the more recent headlines. Just, I think it was last week or certainly a short while ago, the Arkansas Educational Television Commission, after hearing from you all and some others, initially they voted to cut ties with PBS because of that
Right.
$2.5 million budget shortfall when
Mhm.
federal funding fell by the wayside. And then Carlton Wing, the executive director for Arkansas TV, was talking about finances just not working. But
Mhm.
y'all had some testimony at a recent, I think it was March 12th, when the commission
Yeah,
looked at this and they voted to delay it by 180 days.
correct.
Which I think there's been some question about the 180-day delay and when that
Mhm.
happens, what it means. But it certainly seems like in that respect that you and Barbara and others made a difference. You kind of moved the needle on that, at least temporarily. Do you have any thoughts about what people should do right now if they support continuing PBS in Arkansas?
That was when Barbara and I testified before the committee. And there were other citizens of the state that did that. I can't remember how many they allowed, but possibly 12 or 13 people who came in and just told why they'd like to continue. I think it gave the commission a wonderful opportunity to see the broad appeal of PBS. And I don't know that they had that so much in their closed meeting in December when they voted. So I think it caused them to be a little bit more open to looking for solutions to this issue. And we're so encouraged that you don't make a decision like this quickly. And it's never a good thing to just drop it on people. And so this is giving them the commission, who I really highly respect, that's a hard job. And as I've said before, I know what it is to make ends meet in a budget. I just do. I understand. And if the money's not there, the money's not there. And of course, we all know it federally, it has been cut out. And yet, there are so many different solutions in the state that we can look at. And that is what is being done now that we have the breathing room and the time. And I know that the foundation, the PBS Foundation, is working tirelessly to find solutions. And they're coming out with some great ideas. I can't publicize that, will be up to them. But I'm just so encouraged. And I know I keep hearing from people just like me, viewers just like me. What can I do? What can I do? So I know everybody wants to step up. Everybody wants to help. And so I really believe that we can solve this budget issue. It ended up just a minor correction, but it actually wasn't a $2.5 million shortfall. It was 2.1. Of course, when you get in those numbers, it's all big. But there is more than enough good brain power in our state. We're a great state in solving problems and coming together and working together. And we also have a lot of money in our little state. We have the Walmarts and the Tysons, and I'm not specifically saying that they do step up for so many things in Arkansas, and but I just thought of them, the trucking companies and just the wonderful corporations that we have. And so I think all of us working together, given some time, we can solve this.
So is 180 days enough time? I guess that would be a question that I have. And what can we, who are supporters of Arkansas PBS,
Yes.
be doing during that 180 days?
Well, I do know, and they can explain it better, but I do know the foundation is creating a special, sort of a separate account for those of us who want to be financially giving right now and yet are a little intimidated by, well, what if I give a nice gift and then at the end of 180 days, they'll change their mind when it's the end. And so they are creating a special fund where we can contribute and know that if in the end it doesn't pan out the way we all hope it will, they will refund people's money. And so, just again, for me personally, I don't want to give to a losing cause. None of us do. And so, anyway, that's just one thing. But they are working tirelessly, and more will be revealed.
Okay. To keep, for somebody who wants to keep in touch with what's going on with that, I
Yes.
know you all have a website. What's
Yes.
the website address that people should be going to for that?
It's Arkansas Friends of PBS.org.
Arkansas Friends of
Friends of
PBS.
PBS.
So no spaces, probably Arkansas Friends of PBS.org.
Correct.
If people are interested. Okay, I'm going to ask you a more difficult question, and you can choose to not answer it if you want.
Sure.
As I look at the political landscape nationally,
Mhm.
as a conservative, and in our state, the funding issue is only one reason why this was cut. There are political reasons as well, I'm convinced, believing that public broadcasting is not a value that is supporting certain perspectives in the
Correct.
same way as people would like it to be supported. So I'm just going to
Mhm.
throw this out here and say, so you all are working, the foundation certainly is working on the side of things that's the funding, which is the surface issue, but we have this underlying issue that I think also needs to be talked about. And I'm
Right. It's the
curious.
elephant in the room.
Yeah, it is the elephant in the room, Gay, and I hate to bring it up because it is the negative part, right? And so I don't know what to do about that. And I think that's where sometimes those of us who, wherever you fall in the political aisle,
Mhm.
sometimes get stuck is, okay, well, I can give money to this. And certainly I want to know more information about that personally, because I value Arkansas PBS and watch it a lot.
Mhm.
Was just watching the Antique Roadshow last night. And so, yeah, so there's just shows on it that I like. And so I just think about, okay, I can do that, but what if the money is raised and then the legislature and or the governor of the state of Arkansas would say, nope, not going to allow the money to be used in this way. Now, I don't know if they have the right to do that or not,
Mhm.
but I'm curious, what do we do then? I mean, have you all talked about those kind of contingencies or have you thought about them? The Friends people?
Well, I don't, and don't quote me on that. Of course, here we are on a podcast, but I don't believe that the legislature or our government now in Arkansas could go in and take the money that we contribute and transfer it someplace else. I don't think they have that prerogative, that authority. So I'm not really as concerned about that. And back to the political divide of thoughts of program. Some of the programming is not acceptable to some of the citizens in our state. And I just, my thing to that is, well, I don't know anybody, at least again, I just can only speak for myself. I have always valued exposure to wonderful cultural music, art appreciation, dance, whatever. I've always benefited from exposure to that. Well, you get that on PBS. I think I mentioned this when I testified for the committee, but I was not, I didn't like studying in school, high school and all. And I would just sit through history class and draw doodles on paper, whatever. And yet I have learned more history as an adult from watching Ken Burns documentaries on PBS. And what a value to me that I'm still learning. And it's entertaining, but it's also history. And there are just so many programs of value. I have seen programs that I did that they turned me off and I didn't especially or agree with. Well, guess what? I turned to another channel. I have that choice. And it would really make me sad if that choice was taken away. Again, it's that idea of wanting to live in a homogenized society where everybody thinks the way I do, has exposure to the same things I do. And I just don't think that's healthy for our culture, for our state, for us individually. So,
You and I probably agree on that, I'm guessing. And I want to just speak out on the podcast here and just say that I really value the work that Carlton Wing is trying to do here.
absolutely,
He's in a very difficult place, I think, where
absolutely.
he's been told that he has to create a move from PBS to Arkansas TV. And I have some of my former students that work there, and I know that they are working really hard at creating programming. And Glen and I have actually been interviewed on Arkansas Week and for Braver Angels and stuff. And so I just believe there's got to be a both and here.
You
And
hit the nail on the
most
head.
yeah, and
And
that yes, we can have Arkansas programming, and maybe we need to develop more of that so
yeah,
that we aren't as reliant on all the national PBS programming and don't have to pay as much for that. But can we still have a good portion of it that Arkansans benefit from that is PBS
yes,
related? And I think
yeah.
there's a both and here.
That is so, as I said, you hit the nail on the head. And it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. And our state, Arkansas, I said it earlier, but we've just got great minds here in our state and can create some wonderful educational and entertaining programming. And they're already doing that. So I don't see why that can't go along with a little bit of outside help.
They've
I'm not,
gotten awards for some of the
yes,
programs that they did during COVID. I know for the
yeah.
education stuff that was even picked up nationally.
Oh, yeah.
So we've done some things here in Arkansas that I don't even know if people know about that's happened within that AETN environment. So
Absolutely.
we do have the skills.
Yes. Yeah. The one issue is that it takes a lot of money to produce. And I guess equipment, I'm not knowledgeable at all, but I just know there's a lot more that you see on the surface of just watching a show that's been created here. There's a lot that goes into it. And I'm not sure that we're equipped with all of that within our state, whereas access to PBS, they just have a lot broader range of people and experiences to choose from. So I just think it takes us all working together.
We mentioned something about social media earlier,
Mhm.
and I think there are some people out there who might oppose PBS funding because they say we don't need that. Everybody gets a chance to say what they want and hear what they like in this age of streaming and having social media and YouTube and all that. So we don't need PBS anymore. Others are thinking, well, actually, PBS is the kind of thing that we need to protect and maintain because it helps maintain this healthy civic culture. You have any thoughts on either of those arguments coming from different directions?
Sure. Well, believe it or not everybody is on social media. Not everybody's on it. And I can speak for the elderly of the state because I are one, but I don't really live my life guided by social media. Now, I have a little bit of it because I want to keep up with my grandchildren, but that's not where I get my general information. And I know that I'm not alone in that. And as I have talked with people, as I said, who've come up to me, and the majority of them are more mature citizens, and they're a lot like I am. It's just not a central part of their life. Believe it or not, the whole world is not driven by social media, and there are other sources of information.
Okay, we've talked some of the obstacles, some of the negative aspects of all this. You've made a good case for why retaining PBS support is a good idea for Arkansas.
Mhm.
What gives you hope in this effort?
Well, what gives me hope are the people that stop me at the grocery store and people who, yesterday, I got a letter from a lady that I've never met, and she was thanking me for my efforts. And she told a wonderful story about what PBS means to her. And I know that she's just one of many. I have no idea how she got my address, but which is fine. I was delighted and so touched when I read her note. But there are so many people in our state who have this desire to be exposed to the different programming and who love our state, who appreciate our state, and have this idea of all of it contributing to our welfare and to our benefit. So that's what gives me hope.
That's wonderful. Well, Gay, you have given us hope by being on here today. I'm going to wrap up here with the ending question to tie this all together. We have so appreciated you coming on. And I think about when you look back on your life as a whole, your years as First Lady, your civic engagement with the things like the Nature Conservancy, as well as now this Friends of Arkansas PBS, what impact would you hope that people say that you have made?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I think that's for people to decide. I really haven't tried to stand out or make an impact, if that makes sense. I just live the life that God has given me. And I'm not looking to be put on a pedestal of any kind. I would hope that people would see a positive person who loved people, because I've recognized that I've been loved by God, and I've hoped that I have been able to radiate that from my own life. Yeah, that's for other people to decide.
I have a hard time always asking or answering that question,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
because I'm not looking for the accolades, I just want
right,
to make a
right.
difference one person at a time.
Yeah.
Well, any other advice or anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Gosh, I think just look for the common thread in, your friends and your acquaintances, and just be positive, be open, be willing to see past the exterior in people to the person of the heart.
Great advice. Well, Gay, thank you so much for coming on to our time and spending this time with us, coming on to our podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this second part of today's conversation with Gay White. We hope that her story gave you a little more hope and a reminder that we can do good things together.
If you liked what you heard today, share the episode with a friend and help us spread stories of bridge building across Arkansas. And remember, On the Other Hand offers dozens of other interviews like this one. You can find On the Other Hand in your favorite podcast app or on the podcast page of the Braver Angels Arkansas website at arkansas.braverangels.org.
On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas. Music was composed by Randall Standridge of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main, conductor.
From your host, Glen White,
and April Chatham Carpenter.
Join us in working to make our relationships and communities better.